Hi everybody, Dana Sparks, broker of Maximum One Greater Atlanta Realtors, and this week's contract tip has to do with a seller terminating a listing agreement early and how you as an agent or the broker actually recovering the expenses that you have incurred for that listing. So in the actual listing agreements, in and of themselves, there is a paragraph when the seller signs a listing agreement with the broker. There is a paragraph, there is verbiage about the fees that the broker does incur to get the listing up and running. And should the seller default on the contract, and a seller default on a listing agreement would be terminating early without the mutual consent of the broker, that the seller is obligated to reimburse the broker for the out-of-pocket expenses. And in the GAR listing agreement, which is F1, exclusive seller listing agreement, it is under the paragraph C, which is other, it's C1, seller default. And what it states is, in the event seller defaults under this agreement, seller shall, in addition to other obligations set forth herein, and the other obligations have to do with commission. That's a whole nother issue. This video is not about commissions potentially due. This is about out-of-pocket expenses. So it says, in the event seller defaults under this agreement, seller shall, in addition to other obligations set forth elsewhere, reimburse the broker for out-of-pocket costs and expenses incurred by the broker and the broker's affiliated licensee in seeking to market and sell the property. Such costs and expenses shall include, without limitation, printing and copying charges, mileage at the highest rate that the IRS will currently allow as a business deduction, and expenses to advertise the property in various media. Seller shall also pay all costs, fees, and charges for removing the listing from any multiple listing service. The payment of these costs, fees, and charges and expenses by the seller shall not waive or limit the broker's right to assert any other claim, cause of action, or suit, and for other damages, and shall not release the seller from such claims notwithstanding the above. The amount of fees and charges costs paid by the seller hereunder shall be an offset against the claim for commission. So again, this paragraph and what we're talking about in this video has to do with out-of-pocket expenses, does not have to do with commissions. That's outlined in a different part of the listing agreement. Now, in the GAR contract, if a seller terminates a contract early, again, that would constitute a default because there is a beginning point and an end point for the listing agreement. So early termination would be a default by the seller. If a seller does choose to terminate early, or if you as the affiliated licensee of the broker choose to terminate the listing agreement early, there are one of two forms in the GAR forms that the parties may sign. One is a unilateral termination of the brokerage engagement, and the other is a mutual termination of the brokerage engagement. So for the unilateral termination, it is GAR form F87, unilateral termination of broker engagement. And that can either be signed by the client or by the broker. And in a unilateral termination, it does have a place to complete when the termination will be. And in the unilateral termination, the verbiage does specifically state, in terminating the agreement, broker is directed by the client not to perform real estate brokerage services on behalf of the client after the termination date of this notice to terminate. Nothing herein shall be construed as an agreement between the client and broker to mutually terminate or to limit, waive, or terminate broker's rights to a commission or the reimbursement of fees and costs resulting from unilateral termination. So again, the unilateral termination does not alleviate the seller from reimbursing the broker for the fees. In the mutual termination of brokerage engagement, and this is a GAR form F89, mutual termination of brokerage engagement. This is a place, it still does terminate the client relationship, it terminates the brokerage engagement, and there is verbiage in here where the buyer, the seller and the affiliated licensee of the broker do fill out and negotiate various terms for the mutual termination. And you negotiate terms of the protection period. Is it still in place or is it not still in place? And you negotiate the actual amount, dollar amount, for the seller to reimburse the broker for fees, costs, and expenses incurred by the broker in connection with marketing and attempting to sell the property. Anyway, so take a look at those forms. In the RE forms listing agreement, the same thing. This verbiage is spelled out, and in the RE form, it's Form 151, Exclusive Right to Sell Listing Agreement, and it is under Paragraph 3 under broker compensation. Further along in that paragraph, there is a section where a broker can negotiate with the seller to pay a retainer fee for the valuable services that the broker is doing to market and get the seller's property up to market it and sell it for the seller. But the paragraph below that, it states, notwithstanding the payment of a retainer fee as provided above, the seller shall reimburse the broker or broker's affiliated licensees for their costs and expenses incurred in marketing the property, including but not limited to printing costs, advertising fees, mileage reimbursements, and multiple listing fees, if the seller defaults hereunder. And again, a seller default would be terminating the brokerage engagement with the broker prior to the agreed upon expiration date. If the seller defaults hereunder, the right to collect reimbursement for these costs and expenses shall be in addition to and not in lieu of any other claims or causes of action broker may have hereunder, except that these costs and expenses may be offset against the commission. And again, the seller obligation to pay the broker commission upon a variety of circumstances, that's in a different paragraph in the listing agreement, and that is under the paragraph in the RE form listing agreement under closing of sale of property. So I'll let you guys read that. But a couple of points as a broker to you guys as agents. Number one, the broker, as you know, the broker and you, the affiliated licensee, you do incur costs in getting a seller's property marketed and advertised and up and running to help that seller sell the property. And among those fees are the MLS service fees. Now, the contract I just read to you, when a seller signs a listing agreement, it does state that if there is a default, if the seller terminates early, then the seller is obligated to pay the brokerage for those fees and costs and expenses. So you have to remember, however, that the seller is not a member of FMLS, Georgia MLS, or any other MLSers. The broker is. So in addition, those fees that are incurred, even though you as the licensee are incurring those fees, the seller would need to make a check or make the reimbursement payable to the brokerage, and then the brokerage will cut the checks appropriately where the fees need to go. So that's one thing. The check needs to be payable to the brokerage, not to you as the agent. The second thing is that you as an agent, you really need to have a clear accounting or delineation of the fees that you are incurring. So for example, marketing fees, photography fees, mileage fees, printing fees, so forth and so on. Any kinds of those costs that you are incurring to get the seller's property up and running and marketed, you need to make sure that you keep a good log and a accounting record of those so that you can show the seller, should the seller terminate early, you can show the seller what those fees are, and you'll have a definite clear amount of costs. Another option that many brokers choose to do, and as an affiliated licensee, as an independent contractor of the broker, depending on if you're not with Maximum One, you need to check with your broker. But especially what we see is a special stipulation included in the listing agreement when you first sign a listing agreement with the seller. And basically, what that special stipulation would say is, upon should the seller terminate this listing agreement early, seller shall pay Maximum One Realty or ABC Brokerage an early termination fee of $295, $300, $500. You can do just an early termination fee in general to cover all of the expenses and just as a point of doing business because your time is valuable too. So not only would an early termination fee cover your actual hard cost expenses, but your time is valuable too. And you can value your time at a cost so that the fees that a seller would reimburse the brokerage should they terminate the contract early could be a set amount based upon the broker and the affiliated licensee, as long as the seller does agree to that when you first go get a seller to sign a listing agreement. Again, it would be payable to the brokerage. So again, upon early termination, seller agrees to pay ABC Realty an early termination fee of X amount of dollars. Now, in order to be well, just one thing that you may want to consider as an agent when you are assessing a seller an early termination fee is you may want to put a time frame in there. So for example, should a seller terminate the listing agreement within the first 14 days of signing of the binding listing agreement, there will be $0 early termination fee. And you as the listing agent, that broker, you would just pay the broker for the withdrawal fees from the listing services. Again, that is up to how you choose to practice business based on your conversation, your listing presentation with a seller, your time, and as well as to be competitive with other agents out there who are also vying for the to try to get the seller's listing. Now, again, real estate is a relationship-based business, so there could be a situation where that initial time frame, that initial 2 weeks or whatever it is that you choose to do, that you would not charge the seller an early termination fee if they choose to terminate the listing agreement early. Now again, these fees that we're talking about, this would be default by the seller, i.e. the seller choosing to terminate the listing agreement. If the broker or you as the affiliated licensee of the broker choose to terminate the listing agreement, there are no fees incurred by the seller because it is the brokerage terminating it early. So take a look at the verbiage in those contracts. Also take a look at the retainer fee paragraph if you choose to take a retainer fee for marketing services, and hope this contract tip helped you out. Thank you so much for watching. Dana Sparks, broker of Maximum One Greater Atlanta Realtors, satisfying your needs with service, innovation, and education.